Back with the WMAY Morning Newsfeed. I'm Greg Bishop, 740. And we've been talking about the vaccine mandates that come down from Governor J.B. Ptacek for healthcare workers, educators, and college students. Yesterday, we talked with a Springfield District 186 teacher who's on unpaid leave for not complying with the mandate to show her vaccine status or submit to regular testing. There's actually two Springfield School District employees that are on unpaid leave for not complying with that. But we're seeing that across the state, different school districts are reacting differently to this. And of course, you've got the testing questions and how they're setting that up. Are they going to be working through the U of I's SHIELD program? A couple of weeks ago, we heard that hundreds of school districts are signing up all at once, causing a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to implementing the testing. So that we'll have to get an update on here soon. But school districts are handling this differently. As we saw in Springfield School District, 2 employees on unpaid leave for not complying with the mandate. But just down the road in Jacksonville, the public school district there, handling this a bit different because of some unanswered questions and a little bit of gray area. And we're joined now by the school superintendent of Jacksonville, Steve Ptacek, who is talking about a letter that he published on Facebook that he ultimately sent the governor and the Illinois State Board of Education, asking for some more clarity. So, Superintendent, thanks for taking time with us on the WMAY Morning News Feed. I guess just give us the rundown of what your letter is all about. Good morning.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that the letter definitely is not talking about the substance of the executive order. We have been successful through this COVID pandemic staying in school because we stay in our lane. We don't make medical decisions. We ultimately don't make legal decisions. We contact our attorneys. And our attorney on this issue states that the cloudy, the gray area you're talking about is very real, and that a claim under HCRCA could result in each individual claim being up to $500,000 in penalties, and definitely a couple $100,000 in attorney's fees, even if you win. And I've been at several conferences with other law firms that also have reinforced this unknown aspect. And so I specifically wrote a letter to the governor and to the ISBE saying that I do not feel that when there's a mandate from the state level, that the burden of defending that mandate should fall on your local districts. And therefore, I've asked them for several things they could do to help us in our defense when a lawsuit would come our way. And until those things or something like that our attorney feels puts us in a better defensible position occurs, we are not going to exclude for those individuals who've made a claim under HCRCA.
And HCRCA is the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, enacted back in 1998. And I saw this pop up a couple of months ago, and people back then were brushing it off, saying, the governor's executive order supersedes this. And I'm not asking you to judge whether or not that is the case, but ultimately you're saying that there's gray area there that attorneys recognize is there with the conflict between the governor's order, ISB's order, and IDPH recommendations versus what's on the books with the state statute, the Healthcare Rights of Conscience Act. So, again, talk about, I guess, what ultimately you're hearing from some of your employees. Have some brought this forward as the HCRCA as a reason why they feel like they're not going to comply with this?
I will say that we have received a letter from the one law firm that's in the area sending letters out about this claim. And therefore, we do have a realistic expectation of there being a lawsuit if there were to be an exclusion. I think I also have other employees that are fully in support of the vaccination and the testing mandate and are concerned that with our decision. But I think I've been able to put those at rest in the end result, it ended up being a very, very small number of our individuals making that claim. And our numbers are good. Our COVID numbers, especially with our staff, I think we had 3 staff out of 633 employees due to either quarantine or isolation. And it wouldn't be quarantine anymore. Sorry. He did do that with the executive office being excluded or isolation. And so we're not feeling as large of an impact with our staff. We have more students out. So I think right now everybody feels it's the right decision to defend the taxpayers of our community, and we're just waiting to see. I think the governor in an executive order could come out and clearly state that this supersedes during this pandemic HCRCA. And the question we have is, why hasn't he done that? That he did respond to us by changing it from quarantine to exclusion following the Adams County and Macoupin County cases, but those school districts had to defend his executive order and IDPH's guidelines. And I don't think that's right. The defendant should have been the state and shouldn't have been the local, and they should have done what they could have done to help protect the local districts, and they didn't. They have done it since then, but lesson learned, do it now.
We're talking with Steve Ptacek with the Jacksonville Public Schools. He's the superintendent there, and a letter that he published on Facebook that he sent to the governor's office and to the Illinois State Board of Education asking for clarity in this gray area between the governor's vaccine mandates or testing order and the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, which has been on the state books since 1998. Steve, you published a letter. Have you heard back from the governor's office? Have you heard back from ISB? And what's the response been from other superintendents you're familiar with?
I have not heard anything back, and I don't expect to. I sent it out late Friday, and this is Tuesday morning before we even officially started the day. So I'm not expecting them to respond that quickly. So I hope to hear something within the next week. Fellow superintendents, I've received very little communication, but the communication I have has been very supportive and understanding. And I do know even one of our organizations we're involved with asked if she could share that with other superintendents. So I think it's an area that a lot of superintendents don't necessarily want to jump right into because worried of consequences. My board was fully supporting that. Right now, we need to defend our taxpayers' interests.
And ultimately, you're putting out there a couple of suggestions for what the governor could do or even what the legislature could do. One you already outlined a bit here is to put out an executive order clearly stating that this, in a time of emergency, supersedes the HCRCA. But there's a couple of other options you put out there. Explain those to us.
One of them is that the legislature itself could actually change the HCRCA. It's law. So that's a possibility. They could amend that to talk about it not taking place during a pandemic or however they feel. And the last one at the minimal, and probably the most probable one, is that if we were to receive one of those probation letters that a lot of school districts got when it came to not following the mask mandate, which I want to acknowledge, we passed a mask mandate before the governor even mandated it. So we are supportive of what keeps our staff and students safe. But if we were to get one of those probation letters, then we would immediately write to them how we will comply. But our attorney feels that is evidence that it is not the school district's decision, it's the state decision, which puts us in a more defensible position.
Steve Ptacek, the Jacksonville Public School Superintendent, greatly appreciate you taking the time and explaining your letter a bit more here. And we'll definitely reach out to see if there was a response or maybe get your reaction if the governor does indeed issue a new executive order or if the legislature, which comes back next month for fall session, if this is going to be something that they do take up. And I will say the Senate President's office did respond to me yesterday and said that this is an issue under review. What that means, not sure, because I've heard that before on a bunch of other things. So we shall see. Steve Ptacek, thank you so much for taking time with us this morning. Be safe out there, okay?
All right, thank you.
It is the WMAY Morning News Feed at 7:50.